All right, welcome to the next part of this interview series thing on Patreon that'll eventually become the final videos. How about each of you introduce yourselves?
I'm Jericho, the creator and lead writer for Remember the Flowers.
I'm Orion, co-managing Remember the Flowers with Jericho, but I've worked on several other visual novels, such as Arches and Glory Hounds.
We'll just hop right into this. These are going to be a little stilted as an interview because I'm going to try not to be conversational because we'll quickly create clips that I can't cut to out of context because they're no longer tied to a question. So it'll be kind of start and stop with each one. So I'm gonna be I'll be a lot quieter from here on out. So to start things off, what made you first want to make a furry visual novel?
It was the summer after COVID when we were all inside. I had read Echo and Adastra, and they inspired me a lot, specifically with how efficient the resources are, because you can just reuse sprites over and over again. It's like that seems like a worthwhile investment to try and tell a story besides like a comic, which could be very expensive if you don't draw it yourself. So I thought it was a good medium to learn and try and tackle at the time.
I would say, because whenever I wanted to make a furry visual novel, it was because I read Echo for the first time. And before then, I didn't really have a high opinion of furry visual novels, not for any particular reason. I just thought maybe at the time, I thought they were like shallow. Don't like admitting that, but like whenever I finally got to read Echo and I finished it, I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I really want to work on a visual novel. That came to fruition probably like a year later. But even before that, I've have a couple of VNs that aren't even furry that I liked like several years ago.
I definitely get it because I remember seeing Amicus around constantly and being like, yeah, but it's probably you just click the right options and then the sex scene plays and that's the whole thing. It's whatever. I'll just leave it with the art.
100%.
It definitely proved that this is a medium where you can tell like complex stories, and I think that was pretty inspiring.
So in terms of the production of Remember the Flowers, what was the very first thing you ended up working on?
Like very, very first thing was like the initial outline of the story. I had like the beginning set and the ending set still. The middle has meandered a little bit. And then right after that was finding a suitable artist. I thought that could capture the character ideas that I had at the time. Worked on character designs with close friends. And then try and organize a team that I thought could pull it off. It is definitely an investment, and it is definitely a commitment. So if you do decide to do it, it does take a lot at the beginning, but if you keep going, it's worth it.
Yeah. I Remember the Flowers. I wasn't there from the beginning. I jumped in sometime, I think around like build 5, because Jericho had been sharing RTF with me during its early development. And whenever I read it, I was like, oh, this is actually really good. I kind of want to help Jericho with this, because from what I read initially, there's a lot of like visual things that could have been improved on. But I say this, but at the time I had zero experience with RemPy. So RTF is the thing that pushed me to like learn about how all of that works. I think I spent like the entirety of like that January reading up on RemPy, and then from there I took over as the programmer.
Do you have do you have any resources that you recommend for somebody that's first trying to learn how to program in RenPy or trying to program any visual novel?
I think the obvious answer is tutorials, but I think a less like an underrated option is to go to VN devs and ask if you can look at their code and see and use it as like inspiration or a guideline on how you would want it to look. I think RenP is really nice because you can just download it and just dig right in and use a lot of references or use it for reference work. I definitely did that with early visual novel making at the time because it seems scary, but RenP is so easy to do once you learn how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. My first thing was most people don't think tutorials is the obvious answer, but like whenever I started out, I literally just kind of like opened up like any furry visual novel just to peruse like what it looks like whenever you're coding stuff into the script. I adapted that into what I was doing because most of the stuff you will find in other furry visual novels is just like basic code, which is what you want to learn. And the more you read it, the more you understand it. And like even like 3 years into it, I'm still learning. But yeah, like Jericho said, also ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You might be doing something you might be going out of your way to do something you don't have to do when you're programming, and you might not realize it until you ask somebody about it. I ask a lot of people, despite the fact that I've programmed so many VNs so far. Networking is important. So ask questions. Even go on you can even just go on google.com. I would do this a lot. I would just go on Google and type RemP or RemPy. How do you center an image? And you'll usually either find an answer on Reddit or you'll find an answer on, I don't know if it's the official RemPy forum, but I think the forum is called like Lemma Software. You can find a ton of answers just Googling questions even.
How should one go about assembling a team to work on a VN?
Piggybacking off what Orion just mentioned, networking is really important, and thankfully, a lot of people who do visual novel work will put themselves out there already, saying, "Hey, I'm available." There's like a whole like furry visual novel Discord that has like job listings or like people who are looking to be hired. Most artists I've worked with in the past, and at the end of the day, it is just basically commissioning an artist a lot for a lot of similar things. So that's how I looked at it at first. I would just be like, hey, can I just commission you this, and this, and this at the very beginning? Thankfully, we are in a community where we love to make and create art together. It's a pretty good space to try and make a project like that, I think.
Oh yeah, it's like it's even as simple. Just approach if there's an artist you feel like fits your project, just approach them. It's just a shot in the dark. Don't be afraid. Just message them, give them your idea, your expectations, ask them if they're interested. It's really that easy to get a team of people to help work on your project.
Let's see. What goes into leading a team for this kind of project? Communication and so on.
Definitely people skills. I've never been like in a management position like in any of my careers, but I'd like to think I'm pretty good at talking to people. Trying to understand people's schedules, what their limits are and what they want to do is important. It also as the lead, there are certain responsibilities that fall onto you, and you do have to just accept that. There has definitely been times where I have like neglected certain things or have forgotten certain things that have hurt team members in the past, and there's no one to blame but myself. And all you can really do is try to be as communicative as possible, try to be on top of things as possible. If you're going to lead a project, you have to bear that responsibility.
Oh yeah, the communication, very important. Expectations, very important. At the end of the day, this is assuming that you're like paying for assets, you're paying for services from other people. You might have to, if it's not working out the way you wanted to, you might have to play bad cop at some points. But as long as everyone's communicating with each other in the long run, that will help your project.
Sometimes things just fall through, and that is also something that you have to be prepared for as a team leader, is to adapt to the situations at hand and just be like, okay, thank you for your time, I appreciate it, let me know if you are ever interested in future work, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, communication is the big one. Communication is key.
Does your project use any free assets, and if so, from where have you sourced them?
Definitely at the beginning, I use a lot of, I think we still use stock photos for backgrounds, but at the beginning we also use a lot of stock music. We, oh, I'd have to go and look at the old resources we used to use. We stopped using stuff. Go ahead.
I know that in the beginning you used stock images for I think it's Pexels. Is it called Pexels? Pexels.com, I believe, is what it's called. But I know there's other websites where you can retrieve like copyright free like photographs and stuff like that. You can also get sound effects from freesounds.com, I believe. I think that's a big source that people use, freesounds.com. If you want free music, you can go to, this one. I think it's, I actually don't remember their name. I think it's called Free Music Archive. That's where I get some music for other VNs that I work on.
Music is tricky though. I think that was the trickiest one, and that's why we replaced most of the tracks. Is some tracks are listed as Creative Commons 0, I think. You can easily step over people's like toes. I can't remember. Did that one artist actually DM us and say, "Hey, wait, this actually isn't how you can use my music"?
I don't think they ever got back to us.
They didn't get back to us. Maybe it's because we were just worried that we were overstepping the quote unquote license that was on the website.
Well, the important thing is that if you are acquiring any kind of assets, regardless if it's music or sound effects or photography, you make sure you read up on the copyright whenever you're using free assets. I think for now, right now, for like the backgrounds, we use iStock because I think that's not a free resource, but we pay for that one. But yeah, if you want free photography, at least you can use Pexels.
I can relate to the struggle there of like Redmean's Recording made his music available on Creative Commons like 4.0 share alike or something, and I spent like an hour trying to read the language to see if it actually means it's usable in VNs, which was the intended purpose, because it genuinely sounded like something was contradictory in there and I could not parse it.
Share alike is one of those tricky ones. I've been told to stay away from any share alike. And so I've done that. Because at the very beginning I did come across that whenever I was using music, and then another furry VN dev approached me like, "Hey, you might want to be careful about the share alike," and he told me all about it. And we had to end up changing like a good handful of music because of it.
Maybe I need to talk to him about that. Maybe I don't know if he's doing it the way he means to or not.
Yeah. Because there was recently a music artist in the furry scene that released a bunch of like free music for people to use for their projects, but they're all share alike. And I think I asked him in the comments, like, does this mean such and such? But I don't think he ever got back to me, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, it's the same person. Yeah,
it probably is
the Fox YouTuber person. That he did the music for my game.
Yeah.
No matter the asset, licensing is always tricky.
Yeah.
But if it's not share, like usually all you have to do is put like, as long as you credit them somewhere in the game, it's pretty simple.
This seems to be the biggest barrier for most people, really, is how do you maintain the motivation to keep working on your project in the long term?
At the beginning, it was spite. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I had somebody in my life who was in the scene who, when I brought up the idea I was going to make a project, didn't think I was going to amount to anything, and like kind of tore it down like from the very beginning. And I said, you know what? Screw you. I'm gonna do it anyways. For me to prove that I can do it. That being said, that feeling has long since waned, since like 2-3 years ago. Nowadays, we were talking about this earlier. It definitely is the excitement of working towards a big reveal or big plot point, and then finally getting to show it off, and then read people's reactions to it, seeing all of our hard work come together. That's usually pretty motivating. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, more or less the same thing. I love to see fans' reactions to things that we're building up to, seeing if they're angry or happy about it. That's what drives me to get through it. There's definitely been at least like 3 or 4 points in like Remember the Flower specifically that Jericho would share with me his ideas, and he would share with me his script, and I would get super excited. I'm like, oh, I can't wait till we get to such and such build. It's gonna kill everybody. I love the fan engagement. That's what motivates me to get through everything.
Which part of the production would you say is the biggest bottleneck that holds back finishing each build?
It depends on the build. Sometimes it's waiting on assets. Sometimes it's getting the time to actually put it all together. Sometimes we'll have assets ahead of time and we're still like fine tuning the writing. Even last night, I was with a friend for a couple hours on a build that we've been waiting to release, and we've been combing it for a long time. It is kind of a build by build base or situation.
I think in the past, well, I mean, like whenever Remember the Flower started out, it was actually coming out very frequently. But then we've reached a point in the story that required a lot more assets. So I would probably say it's the assets that will sometimes take us a long time, or take a build a long time to come out. Whether it's like sprites or CGs, it's usually sprites. That's the biggest thing that holds us up. And that's usually my job, because whenever we do our sprites, we have the artist draw them and then I render them. So if we're waiting on sprites, it's usually because of me, but then I'm also having to program the game itself too. So I think the past couple of builds have taken a while to come out because there's so much happening in the story at the current moment.
I think I intuitively always thought that that writing would be holding these things back, I guess because of like, especially since my exposure might, like I'm probably thinking of Echo the most as like the Echo project, and it feels like that would be what holds people builds from coming out. But then I know that in Kaz project, every build keeps getting delayed just because he can't get anyone that likes drawing backgrounds, and anyone he gets quits. And just continually the backgrounds just don't want to get drawn. He's like, well, time to work on this
background artists, they're hard to come across, I think.
And they're difficult to spot, well, with their background. Let's see. Do you make a living off of making visual novels, or do you have a day job?
I do not make a living off of my visual novel. I do have a day job, and even just recently I asked to move to get more hours to work. Patreon definitely helps keep stuff going, even outside the project. Like, can't even lie. But I would definitely not feel comfortable depending on it to survive.
No. Never rely on your new project's Patreon to get you through. But I also I work full time. I have worked full time for a long time now, even whenever I started Remember the Flowers with Jericho. And it's going to stay that way for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I suspect the universal answer is going to more or less line up with you only make a living off of your visual novel if you were already basically a full-time artist and you've rolled it into your artist Patreon.
Yeah.
And besides that,
right.
I'm trying to set the expectation for people because I think people think that visual novel creators have more power and influence and money than they do, and I'm like, so I'll just ask everyone. We'll see.
You see how the answers vary.
Yeah. How much does it cost to create a visual novel or a build?
It depends on the artists, the people you're hiring. This is a very, like, it could be a lot, it could be less than. Should always be what your artist says that their work is worth. I'm trying to think of like what was a good ballpark range for the first build of RTF. We had 3 character sprites, coding I did myself, and an editor. Uh, and actually creating those character designs just for that one build alone was probably about $500 to $600, something like that. I can't remember. It's been 4 years. But then obviously when you keep getting more sprites, when you keep getting CGs, it gets more and more and more. And I think you can get by without having a bunch of CGs at the beginning. Sprites, I think, are definitely what you need to work on first, and then work from there. But it can be expensive.
That's a very hard question to answer because it can vary so wildly depending on your circumstances. Like, because if you're going to hire people to work on every single facet of the project, that's going to get costly. But then you have furry VN devs who do multiple things at once. Like, I know that Nico from Burrows, he does the art. He also does the music. I think he does some of the programming, but I don't remember. And like, if you're doing all of the art, including the CGs and the music, that's already a lot of money you don't have to spend. But if you want like an actual number estimate, it can go anywhere between, assuming that you're hiring someone for everything, it can go anywhere between like $500 to like $2,000, which is which hurts to what sucks to say out loud, because then if you set that expectation that that's what people think what's gonna have to be done, but you can make a furry visual novel with almost nothing at the beginning. Like Jericho said, he only had sprites at the beginning. It only cost him $500 to make the first build. And for a long time in early RTF, all he needed was that one set of sprites, so he didn't really have to hire much afterwards. But Jericho got a good like 5 or 6 builds in without having to spend too much money. But then, of course, once new characters come in, you got to spend money on those designs and those sprites, and you want to spend money on CGs. At the beginning, Jericho didn't have any like custom music. I think that was all free music, and then the Patreon grew, and we were able to afford more assets. So then we hired on a couple additional music composers, and RTF now has its own custom soundtrack. But that also gets pricey too. Music is pricey.
Yeah, there's people that seemed frustrated that nobody ever answers this question, and I was like, well, up front, I'm like, it's because there's no answer to some extent.
Yeah,
it's got to be such a wide range. I've noticed that there's a lot of games that are derivative from Ad Astra in other ways, but the games that learn like the production lesson from Ad Astra seem to be like, oh, that game had one sprite in its first chapter, and then like 2 sprites in its next chapter, and like they even delay Neferu and Virginia's arrival for another chapter, so they don't have to have those art assets yet. And then every Echo project seems to rapidly escalate in CG count right at the end, but the beginning has like 1 per chapter and stuff, and like you can kind of see the budget playing out in real time, and you can from there I figure Howley probably might have learned from mistakes in that Echo was like, here's a whole full roster of characters in the first scene.
Yeah.
And how much of a nightmare that must have been in the long term. And then he might have written his next story to specifically avoid that.
I mean, if you even look at like, you can kind of see a similar thing with Remember the Flowers, or at least earlier Remember the Flowers, I think.
Yes, I picked up on exactly that. It's like, it feels potentially slightly wasteful that there's 2 characters in the intro, but I don't know where that goes ultimately, obviously. But that's a lot of time with just Cooper, and I'm like, I see what's happening here.
Yeah, it was I think I'm assuming it was like an intentional choice, but also it was very helpful in the early era of RTF. Where now that we can afford it, we're like slowly backfilling older chapters and adding new art, like new CGs and possibly new sprites. But I mean, even Remember the Flowers, I think it only had like the first 5 builds only had like maybe 2 CGs and 5 builds. So Jericho was roughing it out for a good while before he could start affording more things.
mean, it definitely shaped a lot of early RTF. I've said this before. I've had to I used to have to rewrite scenes because I'm like, wait, I don't even have an expression for him to say something like this. So I had to change it to be more snarky or something. And now we have so much to work with that doesn't have to be like that anymore.
Even just recently, I think the latest build, like I said, I've been actively going back and backfilling stuff. Even the latest build, I finally went back and I redrew Cooper an additional 20 or so expressions. So then I had to go through the entirety of the first 5 chapters and backfill all those new expressions. And now he has more than I think he only had 9 expressions before, and now he's got 30 or something.
I'm tickled by the idea of Jericho's writing being restricted by how many facial expressions Cooper had. He had to slowly unlock new expressions like it's Inside Out. That's his character development in the very literal sense, and that you had to develop the actual character's assets. Let's see. Do you have any advice on how to advertise and run a Patreon to support development of a visual novel?
All you can really do is I definitely I put out the first build out, I think. And then I think I either was about to upload the second one to Patreon or it was already on Patreon. Hey, if you want to go read the second build, it's on Patreon. We're going to try and do regular releases, so please support us there. This is, I don't know how harsh this is going to sound, but they're only going to support the Patreon if the product that you get from it is something they're actually interested in. So you have to make a really good first impression right away, because a lot of people, they'll probably just read the first build and just be like, okay, I don't think I'm going to continue this.
You need that hook.
Yes, you need a hook if you want people to get interested in your project and to join your Patreon. With Patreon, you definitely want to, going back to an earlier point, communication. Communication is very important. I say this even though we've neglected to post updates on the Patreon itself. What we do currently is we have the Patreon connected to our Discord server, and we post updates on the actual Discord server for Patreon members. Though I think starting this year, we're going to start actively providing devlogs onto the Patreon itself. From what I've learned in the past, since I've started RTF, the fans of your project, they very much appreciate communication. Communicate your progress. Don't try not to leave them in the dark. When it comes to actually running the Patreon in terms of income, don't forget, if your project starts getting big enough, remember, taxes are a thing. You're going to have to start taxing your income from Patreon.
Oh, 100%. I think the minimum is 20%, and I think we saved 30% of the income just because I don't want to fuck with the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
You will learn very quickly that your fan donations are not all your money.
Yeah.
No, sir.
I just got my first payout on Itch.io, and even then I was like, oh, this auto deduction, that's a much smaller number than the first number you see.
Yeah.
Gave 100% of my money to my artist because I'm you came out of nowhere and made this project impossibly good.
Yeah, it sure did. It looks great.
Let's see. He's also still working on it, so I'm like, please keep working on it. How do you choose which assets are worth making for each build versus what's best left for the imagination?
There is a fine line. Sometimes if you leave it to the imagination too much, it takes away from the experience. I think that's when it's important to have a visual of what exactly it is. Some people say show, don't tell, or but in regards to a visual novel, I think rather than having a bunch of paragraphs describing an object, it would be a lot easier just to have a picture of the object to not waste time on it. I think that's when a visual is important. And then plot heavy scenes, it's always more poignant to have a special illustration just for that scene that you're not going to see anywhere else to give it a little bit extra oomph. think that's my take.
That one's tough. Well, I don't know if I should. I think I'll just leave this vague. I don't want to feel bad naming anybody. There's one VN that originally there was like a scene or a couple of scenes where there were no sprites for it, and I think that worked great, leaving it to the imagination. And then later on down the line, they added sprites for those scenes, and I did not like that direction. I think there are definitely scenes that don't need art, is what I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide which sprites to make, and are there ever enough?
Oh.
Well, I'm gonna get flack
Orion
for
take
this
one.
I'm gonna
get
get
an Orion question.
I'm gonna get flack for this one. You don't. So I've recently come under fire for wanting to give like even like side characters that you probably won't see again sprites. So I love giving all characters sprites. You definitely don't need to do that, but like at least for our story, I feel like I want the world to feel a little more lived in, which would require there to be faces to be seen. But then the problem has come into where some fans will be like, why does this character have a sprite? Does that mean they're like important later on? And surprisingly, people get upset about that. I don't personally view it that way. If you can afford it, go for it. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it. I've definitely gotten a lot of flack.
That is funny, actually. Yeah, because you a lot of the decisions about what's a sprite or not have probably been made based on budget in the past and time and work, and so the audience probably intuitively picks up on the idea that if there's a sprite, it must be important.
Yes,
and you can mess with that language a little bit.
Well, because I wouldn't say that about like a video game where like all these characters have assets. So I don't really view visual novels any differently than I would. Even some of my like favorite visual novels have sprites for side characters that are not important, and I think that's fine.
Let's see here. We're on to the writing section now. Do you think that choices are important for a visual novel?
I'm a bit biased because I specifically started with a kinetic linear novel, but that was mainly because coding choices sounded scary, so I didn't want to try it at the time. But I mean, as we've gotten further and further along, there haven't been many, if any, times where I'm like, oh, this would be better if it had a choice for the audience. Short answer is no, I don't think they're necessary.
No, I don't think so. My favorite visual novels are all linear. I've never seen the point of it needing choices, though I do think there is merit into putting choices into your visual novel. I think if you want it to be more interactive, yes, 100% put in choices. If you want like good ends versus bad ends, yes, I think that's a good choice. Like like the Leo ending of Echo. That is a great inclusion of putting choices that matter. But you do not need to put choices in your story to make it.
It would be very fun to do a horror visual novel that's just full of bad ends.
Yes,
just trying to get the least bad end.
Yeah. Like it's less narrative choices and more. Here's a lot of opportunities to die. All right, try again. Do you plan the entire story from the very beginning, or leave it open to changing direction from chapter to chapter?
I think I started with a fairly strong start, and I know how it's overall going to end. But most of the middle, even last night, I was working with a friend up until like midnight, trying to parse what I'm going to do with certain characters in the scenes coming up at the next couple of builds. I think that can be a blessing and a curse. It's nice to have a lot of wiggle room, but at the same time, it can be a little bit difficult at a certain point. Like you feel like you write yourself into a corner if it's a little too open-ended. So I had to have someone wrangle myself back in order to actually tell the story I wanted to tell. I would say overall it's good to have wiggle room, but just be careful or else you'll get carried away.
Yeah, if you know how the story is going to start and you know how it's going to end, the tricky part is getting from point A to point B. And you don't want to linger too long between point A and point B, or the story might start meandering too much. It is definitely important to um, make an outline, and in that outline, write out the scenes, how you're going to get to a certain point, how character is going to develop within this time span. Very important. And I'm trying to think of an example. I remember one of my favorite TV shows, How to Get Away with Murder. I think the director went on record saying that they make up stuff as they go, and you can definitely tell that whenever you're watching each new season, because they'd love to come up with some new insane plot twist that just kind of like throws everything into craziness, but doesn't really make sense. So that's why I think it's definitely important to know how you're going to get from the beginning to end.
How does the Patreon model affect your storytelling, such as having to do it for an audience or having to stop what you're doing to finish a current build and then coming back to stuff months later and so on?
I'm trying to figure out what the question is asking. Like, are you saying to push out like regular content? Do you think that like shapes certain things?
Yeah, I think I overclarified and lost the question in the process. I'm asking whether or not people think that having a Patreon affects how they tell their story, or even the episodic structure affects how they tell their story, versus like if they were to hunker down and just like suddenly put out a finished thing, I guess.
Oh, like serialization. I would say the only thing that kind of holds me back is I feel like if I ever do push out a build, I would need a specific word count. And sometimes, like in years past, I would think I'd have to fluff it up in order to reach that word count, even if it was bogging down or slowing down certain things that didn't need to be there. Over time, I think we've gotten better about figuring out exactly how much we need to put in the monthly or regular release.
There was a period of time where I think it was at the beginning of the beginning of the last arc where you said you wanted the builds to be shorter, but I think that came to the detriment of the story, and I think we didn't even stick to that.
No, it was like one build that was like 8,000 words, and the next one was like, here's a 15,000 word one. That's more than what we used to do, anyways.
Yeah.
As we slowed down on pushing out releases, we've devoted to actually making the builds we do release be like a good like chunk of content for that release, instead of trying to strictly focus around keeping it like it's serialized, if that makes sense.
I mean, even word counts. Even word counts don't really mean much as long as something important or something good happens in your build. Then yeah, it's all you really need.
We read a visual novel recently where it feels like it's been like 50 to 60,000 words and nothing's happened, and it's just like it gets a little bit frustrating when you want something to happen, but it's like, oh, there's a new update, oh, but nothing's happened in it yet.
Yeah.
No.
Like that's kind of I guess that was a little bit mean, but word counts, I'd rather have an impactful like 5,000 words than try and read 20,000 and not get anything out of it.
Yeah, like you want to read an update here, it's the feeling like, oh, this is the reason this update existed, is it was trying to tell this part of the story, and not this person was turning in their homework assignment.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to abandon ideas that you previously thought were important to the story?
I want to say yes, but if I abandoned them, I probably forgot about them. I'm trying to think of like any off the top of my head. Definitely not opposed to like completely like restructuring something in the future, based on something that I brought up in the past. But completely abandoning.
I don't think you've completely abandoned anything. Like what's been mostly been happening is we've been taking these concepts we came up with and like restructuring them to make more sense in the story. But I don't think we've, as far as I remember, I don't think we've actually abandoned.
If it was something that was about to be released, and then we took it back before we released it.
Oh, you know what? We did. You know what? We actually as soon as you said that, I was like, oh wait, nope, we actually did. I'm not going to get into specifics, but like we completely, even there was the most, not, I think it was the most recent release actually, which was a while ago. Even up until a couple of weeks, if not like a week before release, we completely rewrote how scene was going to happen because we completely changed the motivation.
You're right.
We changed the motivation of a character entirely, and we were rushing to get that out. So we were rushing to rewrite that scene because even by then we were like, we had Jericho's idea, and I read it, and I was like, I had sat on it for a very long time, but like before, as the release got closer, I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I feel like we should do something completely different with this character, and we still wanted to reach our like release date at the time, so we like crunched hard to rewrite that entire scene almost. So yeah, basically changing a character's motivation is something that we didn't have to abandon at some.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Where do you go for feedback of your story, and do you ever revise chapters of a story that have already been released?
For when I want feedback from people that I trust to give good feedback from. I very rarely look at like comments, or the Discord for like feedback because sometimes it's not constructive. Granted, I don't want to ever put myself in a bubble. I have to like find people who will challenge me on certain things and give me constructive feedback. But I think good like times and uses to use like social media or like Discord is like if they point out something that is like inconsistent with like a previous thing that wasn't caught, that's when I would be like, okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much for correcting me on that. Because after you've written 200,000 words, 80,000 words ago, you're probably gonna forget something. We've had reviews on Itch that it's like 1 star there wasn't enough sex scenes in it, and I'm like, cool, thanks. You gotta like pick and choose where you get your feedback from.
Yeah, if we want feedback, we're gonna get it from someone that we trust that is knowledgeable about writing. As far as like revising chapters, we haven't done that yet. However, that might change in the future. Because Jericho and I have never claimed to be professional writers or master storytellers. And the deeper we get into working on the writing for RTF, we have to put into scrutiny like the earlier chapters. And could be fairly soon even that we might have to go back and rewrite certain scenes to better fit the entire narrative of the story.
Retcons can be tricky, depending on what you're retconning, but I don't think we're gonna change like complete characters, but just like things they may have brought up once on a whim that was never brought up again. I definitely want to rewrite a certain build that had like 7,000 words of Cyrus by himself talking to himself. I hate that. I historically said I hate that one. So I'm not opposed to going back and rewriting things that I personally am not a fan of. But I wouldn't want to do it just to do it. There would need to be a reason why I wanted to rewrite it.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like whenever you started, well, wasn't RTF like your first big writing project?
My first ever like published one, I have a bachelor's in English literature and a minor in creative writing. So I've had experience writing and like doing like community work, but I've never like put it out for people to really, really see. So that was definitely a big jump.
Yeah, so if you're reading RTF from the earliest build to the most current build, you can definitely see Jericho's writing evolve through that. But the counterpoint to that is like, oh, you can definitely see it. Jericho was not as strong. His writing wasn't nearly as strong as it was in the beginning as it is now. Which makes Jericho cringe whenever we get one of our friends to reread it with us. Because even recently we hired someone new on the editing team, and we're reading the entirety of RTF with them so that they're caught up and stuff. And Jericho has just been cringing back and forth reading the earlier chapters.
And there's nothing to do but to reread it and be like, if I'm cringing, that means that something must have happened to make me think that I've improved.
Yeah,
but it's hard.
But yeah, that's also why it's important. Like I said earlier, it's important to plot out or outline your plot so that you can better set up like foreshadowing and plot introductions and stuff. While RTF does have a point A to point B, because we didn't originally have so much of it outlined of how to get from those points, we missed out on opportunities to introduce foreshadowing, and it's probably stuff like that that might end up getting rewritten in the future at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That answer made me shamefully go back and add what is your writing background to the beginning of the writing section, realizing that would have been a good question to ask. Let's see, a bit of a clarifying question to the previous one a little bit, but how do you assess which feedback to listen to? Like, how do you separate the noise?
I feel like we kind of already answered it. Most of the time, like we really need to go and see somebody we like trust who's like in the scene who has written has experience in writing in order to like ask their opinion on things. Because like I said, sometimes you just get shallow comments. Like that's just the nature of social media, and it's not helpful all the time.
Mm-hmm. With public feedback is tricky. Because you have to take into account that a lot of that feedback you're getting is from people who don't know how the rest of the story is going to play out. So sometimes you just have to take it into stride. Like, yeah, they're angry now, but that's because they don't know how this is going to play out yet.
Yeah.
And some of it has. Lately, the biggest criticism I've seen of RTF is like the world building isn't strong enough, and we are taking that into account because part of it is true. The good thing about me and Jericho like co-managing the project together is that since Jericho's the writer, if he presents me his script, me as someone who isn't as nearly as experienced as writing can give him my honest feedback as and tell him like what I'd like and don't like, and I think that helps us get through together. And then I will look into the public feedback and kind of take that into consideration too. And I'll give Jericho a couple of nods or like nudges about what maybe something we want to focus on going forward. Like for example, if I can give the most direct example, people are very interested in Cooper. There isn't enough Cooper, and so whenever I see those kind of comments, I bring it up to Jericho and we talk about it and try to see what we can do to remedy that. But you do have to take public feedback in stride. Don't take it personally, because I know you will run into a lot of negativity sometimes when you're looking at public comments about your work. Don't take it personally. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Only the last couple of questions now. What is the biggest trap you see beginners falling into, or what do you wish you had known before you started making your visual novel?
Biggest traps, I think, definitely people get really excited that they're working on a project in a scene that they've like put a lot of like time and energy into, and then they drop the first build. It might not get the reception they have. They drop the second and third, still not getting the reception they had, and they're like, I'm not doing it anymore. Like, just immediately, like, just drop the project because it's not getting the reception that they specifically wanted. I think if you're going to make a visual novel, first and foremost, you need to make it because you want to tell a story. And don't don't make a visual novel with the expectations of getting money or popularity or like renown. Just do it because you want to do it. I think it's the best way to be happy with the project.
Be careful with the scope of your project. Do not come in swinging. Make sure your story is doable, because if you can, what I feel like most people should do is try to make a small story to keep the scope small, and so you won't get so overwhelmed. Because I think there are a couple of VNs out there that have come in with an idea, and they don't properly take into account like how much is going to have to go into that idea and how long that plot will last and how many assets you'll have to put in there and how long it's going to take. And then like Jericho said, and once you release it, you know, if the reception isn't the way you want it to be, then that can end up being a demotivator. I think keep it simple is the big thing, because like I know I say that, and like RTF is like a big scope of a story, but I don't even know if Jericho did. I don't want to speak for Jericho, but even RTF is like a big scope of a story at this point. But we're gonna get through it somehow. But yeah, scope.
And this last bit is just sort of a catch-all. It's the free space, the soapbox. Is there anything you would like to tell people who are looking to make a visual novel that we didn't get around to talking about, or even just anything you'd like to just say to your peers in the visual novel field, or anything? Just like you can get to anything we didn't get to here.
I'm trying to think of something that we didn't cover. I think we covered like the big things, like be responsible for your own actions and for your team leading skills. Be aware of your limits and how far you should or can push them. Be nice. Don't. I guess this is something we haven't really talked about. There have been some cases of certain people just not being nice to other people in the community. Just be a nice person. You'll be surprised by how far that gets you.
Be supportive of each other.
This is a community. We're here to help each other.
Yeah, furry visual novel is such a small, like, niche community as it is. There's no reason to create a hostile environment between each other. Which can also get tricky too. Like if you're making furry visual novels, and if you're like on the furry visual novel, like any kind of server or anything, you're gonna see other furry visual novel creators have comments about your projects. I tend to steer away from really putting out my opinions on certain like projects, or like any projects that I'm reading. Just be mindful that we're all around each other.
People will hear about what you say.
Yeah. Be kind.
All right, well, that's going to be it for today, everyone. Thanks for coming by, Orion and Jericho. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much.